Love. Some would say it took a backseat when the pandemic forced us apart. As a family-run and proudly Canadian-owned company, Charm Diamond Centers saw the need to bring us together with tales of love and created the Canadian Love Map podcast. Since then, we've shared hundreds of real, uplifting stories that prove love conquers all. So thank you for listening. We couldn't do it without you. And remember, love starts here.
This is a true Canadian love story.
We were meant to be together.
I can't imagine my life without you.
Honestly, he's the light of my life.
It's nice to be in that tractor beam of love.
I'm her biggest fan.
I think I knew I'd lost my heart again.
I knew I wanted a marriage like that.
Difficult roads can lead to very beautiful destinations.
Well, love is the most important thing.
I truly believe that the Maritimes, it sounds twee when I refer to it as being magical, but there's a line in The Sopranos when Tony Soprano is trying to get out of helping to relocate a family, and he says there isn't a geographical solution to an emotional problem. And I actually think there is if you move to the Maritimes.
Hi, I'm Nancy Regan. Today's love story belongs to James Mullinger. James had a dream job at GQ magazine in the UK, but followed his heart into comedy. Then he made another unexpected move and followed his wife to Canada, chasing happiness instead of fame. And isn't it just the way? Fame followed him, even to St. John, New Brunswick. This is the Canadian Love Map. Okay, James, I'm so happy to have you here. I am suspicious, though, and I'll tell you, I've started to suspect that there are more of you than one. I think you either are one of triplets or identical, because you seem to be doing so much in the world right now. How do you even have time to have this conversation with us?
Well, always got time for you. This is my absolute priority of this week. So, and thank you, by the way, for having me. You know how much I love you and I love this podcast. So it's a joy to be here. I think the answer to the question is that I never feel stressed with the amount of things happening, because for so many years I dreamed of living this life. So to actually now be in a position where, you know, and of course there's millions of people in the world that are 100 times busier than I am. But these are all things that I dreamed of doing, and I now get to do them. So it doesn't faze me if I do 2-3 book signings in a day and then do a show that night, because that was always the dream.
That's amazing to me. I loved your book so much on so many levels, and was actually shocked by how much we have in common. And you said that when you interviewed me for your podcast, Mullinger Meets Canadians. But now that I've read your book, I really get it. And I think not only are we both podcast hosts and both the funniest people we each know respectively, yes, but our insecurity that we reveal, the public life nonetheless, in spite of it. We've had a teacher belittle us and have that be a pivotal moment in our life, something we remember, and that in fact gives us wings, you know, at the end. And it goes on and on. But I would love to talk to you about love, because that's the real theme of this podcast, as you know. And what I love about the Canadian Love Map is that we celebrate all kinds of love. And I feel like you have so many elements of love in your life. And I'd love to start there. I've used love 47 times. My inner critic tells me I've used the word love 48 times now in the space of 40 seconds.
You can't overuse the word love. Just like you can't have too much love in your life.
That's right.
Or in a sentence.
All you need is love, as I learned in your book from you and Paul McCartney. But we'll get to that in a moment. Or maybe we won't. What was the first thing you remember loving as a child?
Good, beautiful way to start. Outside of, obviously, parents and my brother, I mean, stuffies would definitely be a thing, which I of course, we all love stuffies as a child. And I must admit, I still get a lot of satisfaction, joy, and love from stuffies. I still take a stuffy to bed. I love the fact that my kids, both who are 8 and 11, I encourage them to continue a love of stuffies.
Doesn't one of them have a stuffy that you had as a child?
Exactly. This beautifully. Yes, well remembered. Amazing.
See, I really did read the book.
You really did read it. That's brilliant. I love that. Exactly. And so stuffies, but I think the number one thing that I remember just loving and being at my happiest was being in video shops and looking at VHS video covers. And it's funny that thing and that magicness of being in a video shop and holding up the cover to a movie like National Lampoon's Vacation and looking at the artwork, that is still something which I got great pleasure from at 6 and now at 44 still get great pleasure from when I pick up my VHS videos. It's a weird thing. From that love became a love of, inevitably, John Candy movies. And watching John Candy movies was the first time that I saw my parents howl with laughter. And I think that was definitely something that I loved then and love now, which is, of course, just being in a room with people where they are howling with laughter. And it was just seeing my parents who were before that, just strict parents, to kind of lose control because of these movies. So that definitely.
Oh, I like that. What can really shift gears in their mood? And if that's something that can make them laugh so hard, it must be something I should aspire to, maybe.
Right. And essentially I just looked at him like which he is and was and still will always be remembered as a superhero. And it seemed to me like a superpower that how could someone have written, crafted, and then filmed this thing that has made my parents lose all control and all of us collectively in a room together with family members of all ages all be in hysterics. And so obviously through that then discovering stand-up and that there were these people that could stand on a stage and do this to a room, it just felt like a superpower. It was how I saw it.
So this has never occurred to me before, this moment, but as I hear you describe that, I see that connection of laughter as being a real sense of belonging.
Right.
When you're in the room with people really laughing hard, it really engenders a sense of true belonging in a way.
It really does. And when you think about like the word home and what a home is, and indeed just like, what a church is, and the fact that it isn't the bricks and mortar, it's the people in it, and it's the sense of belonging. Mm-hmm. And really any room that has laughter in it becomes it becomes where they belong. Like if you're in a room in a circle of people, wherever you are, or it's a room or a basement or a field or wherever you are, if everyone is there laughing together, then that is where you all belong.
Oh, that is beautiful. I just want to linger on let's pause for no. You can pause the recording and then start again. Just linger on that thought for a moment.
But neither of us have had that thought before, and you just created it, and that is a magical thing. This is why, going back to your point, it feels so incredible that we've met at this time when we just both happen to be, as you say, putting out memoirs with very similar themes. I'm not sure at any other time in history, even if our books had come out 10 years apart, it would still be interesting how similar they are. But the fact they both came out around the same week, and we discovered this connection, and then the fact that that concept of belonging that you just set up and we just literally workshopped, we're both going to have to fight over who gets that.
Yes, exactly.
Speech,
I get it.
right?
I get it. It's my podcast. I get it.
It's your podcast and your idea. But yeah, you set it up. I just then repeated it back at you.
James, that's for me, that is the sweet spot professionally of life, is creative collaboration. Is getting into a room, getting 2 or more brains into a room and having something emerge from the collaboration that would not exist if just one of those people had been there.
Right. And it's true. And it's almost what makes doing this job harder in a smaller place, because in the UK, I was constantly surrounded by other comedians and writers, and now the desk that I'm sat at right now is where I write all of my comedy. And yes, granted, obviously it comes from ideas and conversations and things, but what you don't have is room full of, I'm not, and also, I mean, I'm pretty much always touring solo as well. All the corporate gigs I'm doing are by myself. The theatre shows, I might have one support act, but it's what makes the honing of the material and the writing material much harder, because you're not in a workshop environment with other comics all the time.
Instead, it feels like you're in an echo chamber, probably.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah, so really, I mean, I basically had to replace comedy club dressing rooms for like Sobeys. Basically, is where I workshop my material. I'm hanging out in Sobeys and just chatting with people. And
you should consider doing one of those stands where you give out food at least, so you have a reason. You then have a captive audience.
That's true. That's true.
Idea.
That could absolutely happen. In actual fact, there is another project we're currently working on is a sitcom about me moving, a fictional character called James, who's a comedian who's forced to move. We're filming it in Miramichi in August. Miramichi will make up the fictional town, but there's a scene of me doing exactly that in a Sobeys. So you're very
my gosh,
receptive.
Where do I sign up for my audition?
Well, okay, done. I'm going to be in touch because we need Maritime's heroes and Maritime's royalty.
Oh yes, yes. Keep that up. I'll give you 25 minutes to stop talking like that. Okay, so James, you're sitting at that desk you talk about where you write your comedy. Is that the same desk where you became a Canadian citizen?
Actually, I did that at the dining table downstairs. But yes, I sat at the dining table downstairs and sang "O Canada" very poorly, alone in the house. Well, I said my wife was in there. She took a video that must never see the light of day of me massacring that beautiful song. But yes, and it was during a lockdown, so no one was able to come and celebrate. But you know what? It's all about getting the title. I didn't need the ceremony and the party to go with it.
Okay, we're going to go back to the theme of love. And before we move into your love affair with Canada, I'd like to set the stage for that, because if you hadn't fallen in love with Pam, presumably you wouldn't be. Well, who knows? But you might not be in Canada now. Very likely. Tell me about meeting and falling in love with Pam.
Yes, and it's an amazing thing that I often think about this. That I'm, of course, extremely happily married and extremely grateful to have met. But it's amazing when you meet someone and fall in love and get everything you want, which is for the two of you to be together and to have a family. But then also the fact that I just feel such gratitude to the fact that she happened to be from this place, New Brunswick, in the Maritimes, which is my happy place that I love so much. And it's quite incredible to kind of think that was a double gift, because, and again, similarly, like, I mean, her family, I mean, the first time I met her family, I just fell in love with all of them. And I remember thinking, wow, I would want to be in this family, even if we weren't. So it was kind of a three-pronged win, really, to meet someone. And it was really such a chance encounter. We met on my first day of work experience at GQ magazine. I was there for a 1-week internship, which incredibly turned into a 14-year career there, which was part of the plan. I just didn't think that it would go to plan. And on my first day, met Pam on my lunch break. And I can't recall if it was love at first sight, but I kind of think it was. And really, I think we went out that night to a pub, as was customary in England, and certainly in London, every day after work. And we pretty much did our courting, if that's still a word that is said.
Oh,
yeah. You know, you're the host of a love podcast. You would know courting, that's okay to say. It's still a word. We did our courting essentially in London pubs, drinking far too much most evenings and putting the world to rights. And thinking that we should one day start our own magazine. That was literally a conversation we had in the first week that we met in September 2000. And then we eventually did that in July 2014.
Amazing.
No, 2017. Sorry, 2017. I apologize.
So when I interview couples or have conversations with couples on this podcast, I always ask them what they love about one another. This is going to be a one-way street right now, but what do you love most about your wife?
I think main thing is, I mean, I'm absolutely in awe of her. Like, I'm in awe of what she does, what she's done in her life. You know, I'm obviously extremely attracted to her, how she looks, of course. But it's quite incredible that we work together. Like, I mean, when I'm not on the road, we work together on the magazine. So there are times where that can be tricky. For example, the first thing in the morning when you wake up, the first thing you hear, you don't want it to be, did you send that invoice? and the last thing that you hear before you go to bed, you don't want to hear, did you remember to get back to so-and-so? And that's what it's like. And it's quite amazing that we are still very happily married, given that we do work together that intently. And essentially have created a situation where, I mean, where she had an extremely, high-powered job working for Monocle magazine in the UK. Obviously had lots of people working for her. Obviously had tons of responsibilities, and it was highly, highly stressful, which is one of the reasons that we came here for a different quality of life. But suddenly to go from that, where you are doing a lot, but it's very focused what you do, to suddenly now where we do everything. Like, we do the jobs. So there might be 60 people on Monocle magazine, for example, or 60 or 70 on GQ doing all of the different jobs. We do all of them. We are now the distribution. We're all of it. And so it's amazing that we're still happily married, given that. But I think the thing that I love most is the thing that I think that she's not someone that likes to be in the public eye or talk about. But the thing that I just find absolutely incredible is that she got on a plane in her early 20s, went to London, where her best friend from New Brunswick was there studying to be an opera singer. But Pam basically got to London with a bag on her back, a few £100 in the bank, and knocked on doors, and somehow, with no magazine experience, got a job working for Vanity Fair, which she was then promoted to fashion manager within 6 months, then poached by Tola Brulé to work for Wallpaper magazine. Like, the fact that all of this, and this is not, and of course in England, there's this class system at play, but of course with a North American accent, people can't place where you're from or what your background is, and her background is a classic, hardworking Maritimes upbringing, where her dad was a postman, her parents run a body shop in their yard, they did whatever they, and still do whatever they can to give a good life for their family, just hardworking Maritimers. But England, the media word in England is so cliquey and so it's all about family connections and everything else. And then this girl from the Kingston Peninsula in New Brunswick arrives in London and gets all of this herself, which I put it down to a Maritimes work ethic. Mm-hmm. But I find it incredible that someone could go there, become hugely successful. And this was the most fascinating thing I've really experienced in the last few years, where when we moved here, it was very strange. Moved back for her, moved back, and for me, moved to New Brunswick. Lots of people would say to her, how did you convince him, all the rest of it? And because she doesn't blow her own horn, she doesn't really point out the fact that I wasn't really giving much up. She's the one that was giving up the incredibly, well-paid and high-powered job to come to a place where suddenly everyone's like going, oh, how did you convince the comedian husband to move here? And meanwhile, she was the one giving all of that up. So someone that can go to England, conquer it, but then make a decision that the best thing for your children is to go back to New Brunswick. I find all of those things which she's guided us through to be one of the things I love so much about her.
I really appreciate your point, but I also hear the humility in that. For the record, I'm going to flag on the play on the humility issue. But at first, when you were describing the two of you doing the magazine, given how many people it takes to put out most magazines, I was seeing this image of Fawlty Towers, but it sounds like you have managed to foster a much better relationship than Basil Fawlty and his wife. and yet now when you talk about her experience, and I know all your experience, no wonder the two of you can create this magazine on your own. You're both superstars. It's really something. And I do find it so inspiring that it was her attachment to home that it seems to me it was her attachment to her home in the Maritimes that was the seed of why you both decided to leave the rat race, as it were, in London and come back here. And that moves us into our conversation about your love affair with Canada. But it seems to me that, like a lot of relationships, it wasn't always smooth. And that starts with your first flight to Canada.
Yes, indeed.
Tell me about that.
My first flight to Canada, I was told that she lived in a place called St. John. And when you type in St. John into the Air Canada website, for reasons that will become very clear, Air Canada deliberately choose to not have a "Are you sure you mean?" question mark like Google does and like what most companies do, because I accidentally went to St. John's, Newfoundland, rather than St. John, New Brunswick. A mistake which I am told as I walk through, every time I walk through St. John Airport, someone will run over that works there. I know all the people that work at the lovely St. John Airport, and they will run over and say, "We had another one last night. Some idiot got off the plane and said, 'Taxi to George Street,' and they said, 'Wrong province, moron.'" And so it's a mistake that happens a lot. I see it a lot actually at airports. I was at a gate at Montreal Airport a few months ago, and the voice came on the loudspeaker saying the flight to St. John, New Brunswick's leaving in 10 minutes. But if you're flying to St. John's, Newfoundland, the gate's at the opposite end of the airport. 15 people got up and started running. Right? And I think Air Canada do it on purpose because of all the extra money that they're making from it. That's my conspiracy theory. But it is an oddly Canadian thing where you have these towns that have similar names. I mean, again, like there's enough words and indeed letters in the alphabet that you don't need to have an Edmonton and an Edmund Stern. Just come up with two different. Do you really need to have a Sackville, New Brunswick, and then 2 hours away there's a Lower Sackville in a completely different province? It's designed to confuse us.
It is. I will apologize on behalf of our country for that, James. I'm sorry that's giving you
Apology
issues.
Accepted.
But I really got a kick out of thinking you were on your way to visit her parents for the first time, to meet them. And she's standing there in the St. John, New Brunswick airport saying, "Where are you?" And you're saying, "I'm right here in the St. John's airport." So yes, welcome to Canada.
Yeah.
What was it about Canada that on your visits here that made you feel you would like to live here?
It was the fact that, like, when I was, again, growing up in a suburb of London where it wasn't a bad place where I lived necessarily, and I in my act I sometimes exaggerate kind of how bad it was, but there was no kind of sense of community. Like you didn't really know your neighbors. People didn't say hello in the street. And yet when I would go and stay with my grandma, she lived in a seaside town on the south coast of England that in the 80s kind of felt like the 50s. I mean, you still had to lock your doors and things, but people would say hello in the street and the neighbors would turn up unannounced. And it was this magical place where there was, and beaches, and the New Forest was nearby. And so coming here, suddenly I was like, wow, there's another place just like my grandma's. And people literally don't lock their doors. I mean, people in the UK cannot get their head around the fact that that's a possibility anywhere in the world, let alone in the second biggest country in the world. And there's huge parts of it where no one locks their doors. And I feel like, part of it is the fact that people are just, they're not full of rage. And again, I don't know what it is in the UK where, like if you, for example, you get on a train or a bus to work in the morning, you'll just see two people, kind of respectable looking people, getting into a full-blown fist fight because of the anger and the rage and the stress and all those things. And then to come to a place where it's the total opposite. So all of those things compounded. On that very first visit in 2000, I couldn't believe it. People were saying hello in the streets. I couldn't believe the views. And at that time, and those first few years of visiting, I think I thought totally wrongly that this is kind of a magical place that you come to maybe do a retreat or come to write a book, but that you could never have a fulfilling career in media or entertainment here. That's what I thought in those early visits. It was a quaint, charming place. I'll come here to unwind, and then I'll get back to where I thought I belonged.
This podcast is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, Canada's largest family-owned jewelry store. They are proud to be putting love on the map, and the staff at Charm Diamond Centers are thrilled to be a part of your love story too. So visit charmdiamondcenters.com or one of your local stores. Love starts here.
Am I right that Canada was also the place where the seed of your love of stand-up was planted?
Well, very much so. I mean, obviously discovering that John Candy was a Canadian in my early years,
right.
Definitely. But yes, I mean, certainly the first few, I knew I wanted to do stand-up, but it was realizing that I had to do it. I was at a dinner theatre in St. John, New Brunswick.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, 2004. And I realized that I was unhappy with my life in London as it was, but I was also extremely frustrated that I wasn't pursuing the thing that I dreamed of doing, i.e. being a stand-up. And so going to a dinner theatre and seeing all of these performers just wow the audience and realizing that actually they were the stars of the stage. And I always kind of say this, that really, if this is the thing that you want to do, it doesn't matter in what capacity you're doing it. It's why I always find it strange at the end of, those TV talent shows like Pop Idol or American Idol or Canadian Idol, and they're down to the last three, and the performers say, if I don't win this, my life is over. And I'm thinking, well, that's because you clearly don't want to be a singer. You just want to be famous,
right?
Because you can have a very successful career singing and it might be that it's on cruise ships or it might be in restaurants. But if you want to sing, you can do that. But you clearly just want to be famous, which is unfortunately what those talent shows often breed. Whereas if you just love the craft of something, which is how I feel about stand-up, I do not have I don't have any other end game other than being able to continue doing it the way I'm doing it now. And actually, it doesn't even matter if it doesn't stay the way that it is. As long as I'm able to do it, that's the thing. So it was the dawning realization of being in a dinner theatre and seeing these performers, loving what they're doing, being the stars. And I just thought, I can't keep hating myself for not succeeding at something I haven't even tried to do. And that was what gave me the impetus to have my first gig.
Wow, that is connecting to a thought I had just a few days ago. And it was from my book, from showing off to showing up, that another way to put that is that I used to focus on being loved, and now I'm focused on being love. And that's what I'm hearing you say in your description of the difference between, if you want fame and adulation and your relationship, your love affair with stand-up, like every other relationship, had some tumultuous times. I love this quote from your book. It felt like how mobsters described their first hit, except the only person who had died was me. Describing a show you did. Tell me what you remember about that show.
Yeah, I mean, I had so many bad gigs, and it's interesting because I mean the British open mic scene is this kind of fascinating place of, and now, in theory, hundreds of performers, some of whom have been going for a year, some of whom have been going for 20 years. And within 2 or 3 years, it becomes obvious, like, who's going to do okay at this and who's not. And often, I would say, when you kind of hit like the 5-year mark, if you're not doing certain gigs or playing certain clubs, it's kind of clear that you're either going to have to give up or become one of those people that's just been around forever, who turns up, after 25 years, the open mic nights, and everyone's like, oh my God, is he still going? And I would say that I definitely was bad for way longer than most people. So it took me a lot longer so it was a bizarre thing having all of these deaths night after night. And then you think, well, I'm going to give up, and then you'd have one good one and go that. And then that would make you carry on. But I will be completely honest, there were some moments where I felt like every time I had an awful experience, I would always think, well, this is going to be a great story for the autobiography. So the fact that that happened and I got to write about it means that I was right. So I would say to anyone listening to this who is out there, who is struggling and everything's going wrong for them in whatever their chosen field or creative area is, every awful thing that happens is one step closer to the dream being lived.
Mm-hmm. It's fertilizer.
Yes,
it feels like, it just feels like shit at the time, but it's actually fertilizer.
Totally.
I love your exuberance for the region, and you are making, now you're making a career of it, and you really express that love through the magazine Maritime Edit. So how did that really come to be, that idea for the magazine?
Yeah, I think it really stemmed from us moving here and being, in our first couple of years, being absolutely blown away at how much there was to do here. And we knew we were coming to a place with friendly people and beautiful views and all, and we knew it would be a great quality of life. But we didn't realize how much excitement there was. And this is such a huge fact that is left out of sometimes tourism marketing efforts, and certainly by companies that are trying to recruit people here. And the traditional newspapers weren't necessarily covering a lot of this stuff. Of course, the national media across Canada tends to ignore this side of the region completely. I mean, almost every national magazine or newspaper. Well, again, I mean, the two big newspapers in this country don't even distribute in Atlantic Canada at all. So, given they don't distribute, and they've also never really had much focus on writing about the region. So, we're here and we're enjoying this incredible quality of life. And in 2 years, so surprised by all the amazing shows and events and things. And we're learning about these things. But people would say to us afterwards, they'd be like, how do you hear about all this stuff? And it's like, well, we know how to dig and find out. And so really it was born out of a frustration that we didn't, a physical, tangible thing that celebrated the joy of living in and working in and visiting Atlantic Canada, but also something where this is where the name Edit, we do the edit for you. We will go out and find out everything that's happening and we will curate it and deliver the edit to you. But it was wanting, I mean, Pam had a philosophy when we moved here. She said, we're not going to complain about missing things. If something doesn't exist that we want to exist, we're going to do it. We're not going to complain about it.
That's so good.
Yeah. I mean, so when we were sat there kind of not having a magazine to read about the place, we said, well, let's create one.
Well, that's great because it strikes me, people react to you. I'm watching this studiously. People react to your optimism and exuberance. Like it lights up rooms, it lights up, the internet, and you're putting that in the pages of a magazine.
Oh, that's nice.
Really? And
that's really, well,
yeah, I think so I congratulate you on that. And it makes me think of a phrase that I heard first from Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan friar, love in action. And I thought that about your book. It's going to make me emotional, but it's okay. As you know, I'm very comfortable with emotion.
Yes.
But I thought that phrase this morning when I was thinking about your book. It is, in a way, it's love in action because it is opening a door for people to see beyond the perfect image they see on stage and to see into your life and into your mind and into your heart. And I think that's such a gift. But I think your life seems to be love in action.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like, and I would say it's all about this place. I truly believe that the Maritimes, it sounds, it sounds twee when I refer to it as being magical, but there's a line in the Sopranos when Tony Soprano is trying to get out of helping to relocate a family, and he says there isn't a geographical solution to an emotional problem, and I actually think there is a geographical solution to an emotional problem if you move to the Maritimes, because I feel that moving to a place where people are caring and loving and this sense of community and supportive. I mean, this is the other thing, is that even though when we said we were starting a print magazine about Atlantic Canada out of our home in New Brunswick and distributing it nationally, even though people said you're mad, in the same way when I said I'm going to continue my comedy career living in a small town in New Brunswick, people said you're mad. But they did also say, what can we do to help? And that is the real secret weapon of the Maritimes, is the way that people do look out for each other. So we might not have, the national newspapers even distributing themselves here or writing about us. But everything is grassroots here. And that's how I've had to do my stand-up. And again, for both of us with our book tours, it's very much a grassroots approach, where it's going out and meeting people. And that love in action is just infused with everything here. And it's communities, it's neighbors, it's areas. And I think that's the thing that I love so much about the Maritimes, that it feels like one small town all together. And that to me is this place is love in action.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, we can't finish a conversation about love without talking about how love in action shows up in your personal life. You've got a family, of course, your own family and your extended family. How is love showing up in your life these days?
Good question. I think it's something that I inherited. Again, I put it all down to this region. I think the celebratory nature in the Maritimes has made me want to celebrate things. And really, that's what the magazine is. The magazine is really just me celebrating other people. That was always the thing. It was never about us. It's about, well, here's all these amazing people doing all these amazing things here. Here they are. And so to me, it's always been about celebrating others. And really, that to me is love in action.
Well, that shines such a bright light into the world. It really does. And I guess, James, I'd like to end by asking you what advice you have to give people. There are a lot of people who will have tuned in to this because they want to do stand-up comedy. They have a dream of doing it, or they might have a dream to do something entirely different. What is the one thing you would say to encourage them?
It really is about getting out there and doing it, because failing is something that I and every single person has done, 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times even, in order to get anywhere in this field. But if someone has a dream of something they want to try, or a new path in life, the worst thing in the world is to not do it. That's when I was at my lowest ebb, my most depressed, that desire to do something and not doing it. So once I think you realize that you are going to be a better person when you are doing the thing that you dream of doing, then it becomes very easy. So I would say just think about how great life's going to be when you're trying to do this. Even when it's going badly, it's still much better than not doing it. So whether it be stand-up comedy or becoming a nail technician, whatever it is, today's the day.
I love it. Today is the day. Well, today is the day I got to have you on this podcast, and I'm so, so, so grateful. I want people to remember that your book is called Brit Happens, and it is so much more than just a funny book. There's so much heart, and I appreciate the book so much. But also, I want people to know how they can find out more about you.
I guess just my my website has links to all of my social media channels, and everything is just at James Mullinger. So my website is jamesmullinger.com. But I would love for people to get in touch, because I love to chat.
I think that comes across.
Yes,
I think if we've learned anything, it's that you and I have no problem chatting.
Yeah, that is absolutely.
Thank you, James, so much for this.
Thank you for your support and friendship, and thank you for writing this, because I too have found this a spectacular guide to life and has brought me much joy. So thank you.
For the record, he's holding up my book.
Oh, sorry, I forgot that. Yes, everyone's listening.
I will say we've had a bit of fun, James and I, since we met less than a month ago, promoting each other's books. So that's great. Thanks, James, so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Canadian Love Map. If you love us, please subscribe and share. And if you want to help us spread the love even more, rate and review our podcast. We'll be back next week with another love story to add to the map. This podcast is presented and made possible by Charm Diamond Centers. It's hosted by me, Nancy Regan, and is produced and distributed by Podstarter.
This
has been
a Podstarter
production.